Good afternoon, everyone. The Subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies will come to order. The complication of the afternoon, at least the one we know of at the moment, is that there are 4 votes scheduled for 3 o'clock. This voting thing is becoming much more common, and it makes it more difficult for us to do hearings and other things and of our work. Senator Shaheen and I have agreed to forego our opening statements, which I assume will meet with approval. We do want to hear from the Administrator, and so I will recognize the Administrator for his testimony. We'll figure this out as we go throughout the afternoon.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that. We're here to talk about the FY 2020 budget request for NASA. This is another very strong budget demonstrating this administration's commitment to space exploration, not just space exploration, but also aeronautics. A lot of people sometimes forget that the first A in NASA is aeronautics, and I know, Chairman Moran, you know that all too well, being from Kansas. So this is a really strong budget request. There are some significant changes that are going to come, and I know we have talked about that already. The budget request that is before the Senate right now shows that we intend to land on the moon in 2028. Since the budget request was put forward, the administration has made another determination that instead of landing on the moon in 2028, that we should have the next man and the first woman on the moon in 5 years, if you can imagine that. And I will tell you, as an agency, we are very capable of achieving that end state. In fact, technologically, everything we need to accomplish that is there. And in fact, the 2028 landing on the moon included a number of programs that we were considering funding in 25, 26, 27, and 28. So really, in order to move it up to 2024, the only things that we need to do is take those elements that were going to be funded in those other years and move them forward. So think of this as, in essence, a surge of funding for the purpose of getting to the moon within the next 5 years. And this agency is perfectly capable of achieving it technologically. What I'm here to do is share with you the direction that we are heading now, but I will also share with you that we are not in a position right now to say what that budget number is or necessarily where the administration is interested in that money coming from. NASA has done some preliminary work. We are continuing to work with our partners over at OMB and our partners over at the National Space Council to come with a unified administration position that we can present to Congress for further review. So that's where we are in this effort, but I think we are in a good place to go back to the moon by 2024. This time, of course, under the President's Space Policy Directive 1, when we go to the moon, we're actually going to stay. The word is sustainable. He wants a sustainable return to the moon. And so that is our intent. We want to go to the moon with commercial partners, with international partners. We want to go sustainably to the moon, and ultimately, we want to utilize the resources of the moon. Well, what are those resources? Water ice. Hundreds of millions of tons of water ice on the south pole of the moon. Water ice represents water to drink. It also represents air to breathe, so it is in fact life support. Available on the moon in hundreds of millions of tons on the South Pole. We also know that water ice, hydrogen, and oxygen represents rocket fuel. It's the same rocket fuel that powered the space shuttles. It's the same rocket fuel when put into cryogenic liquid form, hydrogen and oxygen. It's the same rocket fuel that will power the Space Launch System, which is a critically important rocket for achieving the end state of the next man and the first woman on the South Pole of the moon in 2024, which is the direction of this administration. So I will not continue. I know that there are questions. I just want to say it's an honor to be here. Look forward to your questions and look forward to further discussions about the 2024 agenda.
Administrator Bridenstine, thank you very much for being here. Thanks for the conversation that you and I have had in my office, and Senator Shaheen tells me the same occurred with her, and I'm grateful for that. Let me start by talking about what is the circumstance we face in which you're going to be, someone within the administration is going to be requesting additional dollars.
Yes, sir.
Tell me do we know what the amount of those additional dollars will be? Our conversation has been about where they come from.
Right.
But do we know what amount of dollars we're looking for?
Sir, we at NASA have put together, I think, a pretty good proposal to OMB and to the National Space Council. They are doing their own independent assessments to basically come up with a unified administration position. I will tell you, sir, and I think this is important, I read an article this morning that indicated that it was $8 billion additional money per year for the next 5 years. I will tell you that is not accurate. It is nowhere close to that amount. But I think I don't want to throw out a number until we have we have gone through the process with OMB and the National Space Council.
Well, then tell me about the work of NASA to date. What have you found in your analysis, your studies? What is needed to bring this goal of an earlier landing on the moon to reality?
Great question, sir. A couple of things. Number one, we have done a number of studies and analyzed it in every possible way you can imagine. The only way we are going to get humans to the surface of the moon within 5 years is to take advantage of the capability that this committee, and in fact the United States Senate has been supporting now for a number of years. The Space Launch System with the Orion crew capsule and the European Service Module is the system that will enable us to get to the moon within the next 5 years. The reason is it's the only system that is going to be capable of carrying humans. Now, in order to get those humans to the moon, we're going to have to not just, what that system does is it gets our humans to what we call a near rectilinear halo orbit around the moon. Once they are there, we need to get those humans to the surface of the moon, namely the south pole of the moon. In order to achieve that, we are going to have a gateway. We call it the gateway. Think of it as a reusable command module in orbit around the moon permanently. Again, the goal here is long-term, sustainable return to the moon. In other words, we can take humans to the moon, whatever part of the moon that we want to get to at any time we want to get there. That's the goal of a sustainable return to the moon. But we need a reusable command module in orbit around the moon permanently. We call it the gateway. What we are doing now is we are focused really on two elements of that gateway. Think of a small space station in orbit around the moon. The two elements we need are power and propulsion. That's one element. The other element is what we call a utilization module. It's a very small habitat, if you will. We could take the SLS, the Orion, the European Service Module, use that system to get our astronauts to the gateway, and between now and 5 years from now, aggregate at the gateway a landing system. And once we have that landing system in place, that gives us the ability to get to the surface of the moon. The gateway has solar electric propulsion. What does that mean? That means that the gateway is maneuverable. When we think back to the Apollo era, we landed in the equatorial regions of the moon, so we learned a lot about the very specific places we landed on the surface of the moon. When we landed in 1969, from 1969 up until 2008, 2009, we thought the moon was bone dry. 2008, 2009, NASA makes significant discoveries. There's hundreds of millions of tons of water ice at the south pole of the moon. So we want to be able to get to more parts of the moon than ever before. The gateway gives us more access to more parts of the moon with humans, a sustainable presence. We've got to get that landing system built. And that's really where the new dollars are going to come from, getting the landing system built so we can get from the gateway to the surface of the moon.
Administrator, you've addressed this in a fashion already in what you just said, but what would be the objective to be accomplished of landing a woman on the moon? What is the reason or what's the desirability of doing it earlier? What advantage does that give us? And how does that enhance or advance the other objectives of NASA and its goals into the future? How does this change the timeline or consequences to other things, other goals of NASA?
Yes, sir. So by direction of the President, the Vice President announced at the last National Space Council that the next man and the first woman on the moon will be Americans. He also announced that the target would be, within 5 years, having a human on the south pole of the moon. The question is, why the south pole? Well, that's because that's where the resources are. That's where the water ice is. That's where we need to get in order to utilize the resources of the moon, which is in the President's Space Policy Directive 1. But there's so many more reasons to go to the moon than just utilization of the resources, that life support capability. In fact, what we talk about the rocket fuel. The reason we go to the moon, it's about American leadership. It's about leading a coalition of nations for a sustainable return to the moon for science. A lot of people don't realize how much science is available left to learn from researching not just the moon, but researching deep space from the moon. When we think about the moon, it is a repository of great scientific data for the last, I don't know how many billions of years, but a long time. The challenge with the Earth is it has this very active geology, a very active hydrosphere, a very active atmosphere. Well, that doesn't exist on the moon. What does that mean? That means anything that impacted the moon billions of years ago is today right where it was billions of years ago. And that includes not just meteors, it also includes subatomic particles. We talk about the charged particles coming from the sun. The moon can give us great knowledge about our own solar system. But also, so there's lots of scientific information. Again, we didn't know there was water there until 2009, really. So really, we've only known this for about 10 years. So what else do we not know about the moon? The other thing that's important to note is that from the moon, we can do science deeper into space. We talk about potentially having science on the far side of the moon. Why is that important? Because it's quiet. From an electromagnetic spectrum perspective, there's no interference from all of the radiation that happens here on Earth because of human activity. So on the far side of the moon, we can study way back and see, no kidding, in some cases, the very first light in the universe, which is an important capability that we can not only do from the moon, but the moon would enable us to do more of that capability. But more than anything, sir, and this is the important piece, we want to go to Mars. In the last year, since I've been the NASA administrator, we have discovered that there are complex organic compounds on the surface of Mars. What does that mean? The building blocks for life exist on Mars. We've also discovered that the methane cycles of Mars are perfectly commensurate with the seasons of Mars. Doesn't guarantee that there's life, but the probability just went up again. Those complex organic compounds do not exist on the moon. They're all over Earth, and of course, now we know that they're all over Mars. We also discovered, just since I've been the NASA administrator, that there's liquid water 12 kilometers under the surface of Mars. What do we know about liquid water? Anywhere it exists on Earth, there's life. Could there be life on Mars? I don't know. But I think the United States of America ought to be the country that finds out. So we go to the moon because it is a proving ground. How are we going to live and work on another world? In other words, Mars. The moon and the Earth, we are a system. We're always together. It's a 3-day journey home. Apollo 13 taught us that we can have things go bad on the way to the moon and we can still make it home. If that would have happened on a journey to Mars, it would have been over. The moon is a proving ground to prove technology, reduce risk, ultimately take all of that technology and use it for a mission to Mars. When we're at Mars, Earth and Mars are only on the same side of the sun once every 26 months. When we go to Mars, we have to go to stay. We have to learn how to live and work on another world. I'm sorry.
Next time, Administrator, I'll ask you for your top 3 reasons. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you for being here, Administrator. And I completely agree that part of what NASA is doing that's so exciting is for science. I had the chance to go last night to the Congressional Dialogues dinners where Doug Brinkley talked about his book, American Moonshot, John F. Kennedy and the Great Space Race. And he talked about, as part of his book, the excitement that John Kennedy was able to build when he sold that idea to the American people and how excited kids got. I remember as a child being in grade school and high school and listening to John Glenn orbiting the globe and Alan Shepard, the first American in space, and how excited we all were. And that's why I was so disappointed when I saw your budget again proposes eliminating NASA's education programs, the Space Grant, the Minority University Research and Education Project, the Program to Stimulate Competitive Research, EBSCOR. It's the way that NASA has gotten into schools all over this country to get kids excited. And if we're going to have the future scientists and researchers we need for the space program, we've got to start when kids are in school getting them excited about this. So I don't understand why you're proposing again to eliminate these programs.
So NASA does a lot of outreach to young folks all over the country, and we touch every state in the union, and of course that's important. We want, exactly as you identified, what Douglas Brinkley talks about, that inspiration. That's what NASA does, and we have a history of that. By the way, Douglas Brinkley is a professor at my alma mater, Rice University. Go Owls! I had to throw that in there. But to your point, we have a big ambition and a big heart for reaching those young folks. The way we do that most effectively is through the various mission directorates. So the Space Technology Mission Directorate, for example, has a lot of research done at universities that young people get engaged in at the university level. The Science Mission Directorate, for example, we're very involved in FIRST Robotics, which has demonstrated an amazing capability to engage young people. In fact, I was out at the Mars InSight landing back in November of last year. Some of the technologists, the engineers that were building those robots that are now on Mars, they got started in the FIRST Robotics program.
And if we're being parochial, that started in New Hampshire.
Yes, ma'am. That's great to know. I'd love to maybe make a trip out there and learn more. But there are ways that we are engaging young folks.
And I appreciate that. And however, last year, this committee on a bipartisan basis did not agree with cutting those programs, and hopefully they will not agree again this year. I think that is not the right direction if we want to continue to engage people across this country in the importance of NASA's work. As we discussed yesterday when you came to see me, one of the concerns that I have is about water contamination that has shown up at some of NASA's sites. There is a report recently from the New York Times that states that NASA, along with the Department of Defense, lobbied the administration to adopt a weaker standard for groundwater pollution that's caused by PFAS chemicals. Those chemicals, as we discussed, have been found in firefighting foam, and they exist in groundwater across this country. Can you talk about whether, in fact, NASA lobbied the EPA to put in place weaker standards for PFAS pollution?
Ma'am, yesterday after we talked, I went back to NASA. We opened up these questions to all the different people that were involved, and the answer is we reject the notion that the New York Times put in there that NASA was involved in that. We were not. We have never advocated for weakening the standards for the clean water because of the PFAS pollution. So it is right now on our agenda to go through all of the different NASA centers and find out which of them have used PFAS and how it has affected not just the centers where it was utilized, but the communities around it. NASA is going through that right now, and it is our intention, and we support the EPA as they go about doing the scientific analysis to determine what levels are safe and unsafe. And as far as anybody at NASA can tell, we have been fully supportive of the EPA's scientific analysis of this.
So you did not lobby to try and get the EPA to put in place weaker standards?
That is correct.
Good. Well, thank you. I'm pleased to hear that. I know that NASA has acted very responsibly in terms of the wells that have been polluted at Wallops Flight Facility. So I hope you will continue to act in that responsible way.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Shelby, the chairman of the full committee, has joined us. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that we must have with NASA a unified and clear direction from the NASA, from the administration, and the Congress to achieve the goal of using an American rocket to put American astronauts on the moon. Ambiguity on options and the program, I think, only detracts from a lot of these efforts, and some of the recent comments made by you and others have arguably created confusion. It has with me. Could you take a minute or two and elaborate on some of what we discussed in our meeting yesterday about SLS and how it's the only launch vehicle capable of launching crew to land on the moon? And considering risk, cost, time, and other factors, your view as administrator about SLS being the option to ensure a successful crewed lunar landing mission in 2024. Is that
Yes.
too much?
No, sir. It's we're right in line on this. We have looked at options, and we have determined that the only option where we are going to be able to put humans on the surface of the moon in 2024, which is my mandate, is to utilize the SLS, which is, of course, will be by far the most powerful rocket in the American inventory. Nothing comes even, in fact, in the world, nothing comes close. And not just the SLS, but utilizing.
It could be used for other things too, could it not?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. In fact, the SLS, when we talk about launching to Europa, for example, launching to Europa, if we use rockets that are currently available off the shelf, it would be a 7-year mission. And Europa being a moon of Jupiter, a water world, if you will, which we believe has a probability of having life. It's 7 years by conventional rockets that currently exist. With SLS, we can cut that down to less than 3.5 years. So it is a very capable asset for the United States of America, and it's really the only rocket that we're going to have capable of taking our humans to the moon in 2024.
I know the time has slipped on it some. It slips on a lot of things. But what's important to build that rocket and build it right, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And I know Boeing, we've spent a lot of money on that. And I think it needs to be finished rather than go to something else, you know, that's out of expediency.
And we are close. We're getting very close.
Well, I appreciate your statement on that. Both Boeing and SpaceX have had issues while developing their crewed capsules. You're familiar with this. The most recent SpaceX anomaly caused the complete loss of the crew capsule. During past anomalies that have involved commercial vehicles, NASA has conducted their own independent reviews of the incidents. This recent incident involved testing a vehicle that is intended to carry crew to space, and it seems more than appropriate for NASA, of all agencies, to conduct its own independent investigation to ensure, of course, crew safety. My question is this. As has been past practice, when vehicles are lost, will NASA conduct its own independent investigation into the recent crewed Dragon anomaly and make a public summary of these independent results available?
So right now, NASA is doing a review. We're doing it side by side with our partner, SpaceX, in this review.
Now, what does side by side mean? Does that mean you're doing it jointly, or they're doing it and you're just tagging along?
It's jointly. I mean, it means that our scientists and our engineers are side by side.
Is that unusual to do it jointly?
Not in this case.
I thought they did the NASA independently. Can you be independent and reach independent conclusions if you're doing something jointly with somebody? Well, will you be?
So I would say that the engineers that we have at NASA are extremely sensitive to what we are trying to achieve. And they have an obligation to make sure that we are putting forth only the most accurate and precise data for the protection of our astronauts. And I have every confidence that they will, as SpaceX conducts the investigation with our engineers, that we will get very accurate information as to what the anomaly was.
This is a departure from the norm a little bit.
Not that I know of.
Well, it's not strictly an independent investigation if you're doing it with the people who built and launched the rocket.
It is not strictly an independent investigation.
Well, that's not the norm, I don't believe, but we'll check that out. And regardless of the impact schedule, do you agree that NASA and SpaceX should be in complete agreement on the root cause of the anomaly, and that any necessary corrective actions will be appropriately tested again prior to flying NASA astronauts being on board?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your testimony today.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, thank you. Senator from West Virginia, Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Chairman. Last year, I was honored to meet with Katherine Johnson and her family during a dedication ceremony for the statue of Miss Johnson at West Virginia State University. You know, she turns 100 years old, and she's unbelievable. It's my hope that the students who pass by that statue every day are reminded of Catherine's legacy and inspired to keep their passion for knowledge alive, and I cannot be more proud of NASA's independent verification and validation facility in Fairmont, my hometown. Through the contributions of hidden figures like Katherine Johnson and Dorothy Vaughan, as well as the Rocket Boys and Homer Hickam from Colwood, West Virginia, has contributed immeasurably to our nation's advancements in space, and it continues to contribute to the work completed at 4 and 5 facility in Fairmont. The Green Bank Observatory, I think we spoke about that, and I appreciate it, in Pocahontas County, and the WVU Robotics Technology Center. So I look forward to seeing you, hopefully, at the dedication at the 4 and 5 facility this year. But given the integral role West Virginia plays in safety and security, robotics refueling, identifying objects both near our plant and across the galaxy, I'd love to have you see the incredible work being done firsthand. So I would say, I hope you're able to come. Will you be able to come to our dedication?
We have the invitation, sir. We're working through it, but I would love to be there.
Yeah, well,
I
we're
can't 100% commit.
We think you will be. We're just hoping for you to be there, okay? So
Okay.
I want to make that formal invitation for you to be there and be able to see it, and I know Senator Capito and I both love to have you in our state.
Thank you, Senator.
The other thing I want to talk about is the near-Earth orbit objects at Green Bank. And I think you know, I think you've been brought up to speed on the Green Bank telescope.
Yes.
In a nutshell, what we're having a problem with is the funding mechanism. And I think it can be a tremendous asset for the security of our nation and safety of our globe. So I don't know if you can provide me with the next 5 years of the NASA support at Green Bank as directed by fiscal year 19 appropriations bill.
We do utilize Green Bank. It's of course the National Science Foundation asset. We use it. In fact, we used it back in November when we landed InSight on Mars. We were able to get data back very quickly because some of that data was flowing through the Green Bank
Right.
Observatory. So
I think also, if I might interrupt, this year in January, the Green Bank telescope helped give the astronomers the most detailed images over a potentially hazardous asteroid passing close to Earth.
yes, sir. It has great value, and we use it. We are a customer of it.
We need it involved in your funding.
Okay. Okay.
They're having a hard time staying afloat, and you know that. And with the National Science Foundation, if they don't partner up, and it's a natural asset for our country. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's in a quiet zone. It does a great job. So I guess I would just ask if you are looking at that, your priority for looking at that in your budget.
We will take a look at it, sir.
Okay. And in given your stated priority for mapping near-Earth orbit objects, can you tell how Green Bank plays into that part?
Yes, sir.
Because I don't think it's tied in.
Here's this is a really big issue, not just for our country, but in fact for the world.
The world, right.
In 2013, a lot of people maybe in this room remember an asteroid that entered the Earth's atmosphere over Russia, an asteroid that ultimately blew up over a province called Chelyabinsk in Russia, and it basically carried, when it exploded, it had the amount of energy of 30 times the atomic bomb at Hiroshima. And of course, that kind of event is going to happen on average once every 60 years. That event resulted in 1,500 people going to the hospital. It resulted in 7,200 buildings being damaged significantly. It resulted in damage of those 7,200 buildings. They were in 6 different towns around the area. It was a huge explosion. Now, so we have to detect, track, and characterize those near-Earth objects that are 140 meters or bigger. That explosion was an asteroid that was 20 meters wide. So we're talking about characterizing asteroids that are 140 meters or bigger. So far, we believe there's 25,000 of those near-Earth objects that could pose a threat in the future. Nothing right now is posing a threat, but in the future. And so the question then becomes, how do we characterize them? So we need ground-based surveillance, which we have. I don't know how Green Bank could play into that, but it could be a piece of the solution. But we also need space-based telescopes that can detect, track, and characterize.
I think tying Green Bank into your network now would be a tremendous asset. And I think that would be part, and we could do that for probably low budget, having this asset already at our disposal.
Sir, we'll look into that.
So I formally invite you again as a public invitation to West Virginia to come see and the dedication for Katherine Johnson 4 and 5 facility. I think it'll be something special.
Yes, sir, we'll do that.
Okay? Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the chairman and the ranking member for their leadership. Welcome, Mr. Administrator. It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
And look, I know that you're not responsible for the final sign-off from the budget at OMB. So I just want to get your responses to a couple questions on the merits of some of the programs that are ongoing at NASA, because we had a conversation last year at the hearing, and I just want to make sure you're still in the same place this year with respect to the merits of those programs as you were last year, because obviously this committee will make its own decisions with respect to our budget priorities. So last year in our exchange, you said, I'm quoting, "It's absolutely important to me that NASA follow the guidance of the decadal survey," and a brand new decadal survey came out in January of this year. This was last year. You still believe it's important that we follow the recommendations of the decadal survey, right?
Yes, sir, I do.
And you pointed out then, and it's still the case now, that the PACE program and the Clario programs are priorities under that survey. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
All right. And last year, we also talked about the Restore L program. And this is what you said at that hearing, quote, "This is important. Robotic servicing for our country is a critical capability that we need to have for a whole host of strategic reasons." You would still agree with that, right?
100%.
Absolutely. And then there's another program that was, in fact, ranked #1 by the 2010 decadal survey with respect to astronomy and astrophysics. That's the WFIRST program. It had the highest scientific priority space astrophysics mission rating, and you agree that that's also an important priority for our country, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I just wanted to get your views on the merits of those programs, and I appreciate your testimony, and I look forward to working with the committee on those priorities. I understand Senator Shaheen brought up the issue of PFABs. I appreciate that. Look, in Maryland, we have, we're very proud of two things. One, we have NASA Goddard. They do lots of good work in many areas, including earth sciences. And in nearby Virginia, we have the Wallops Space Facility. I know you visited that.
Yes, sir.
As well, and a lot of Marylanders work there and are proud of the work they do there. And there has been, though, a PFABs issue at Wallops, and we look forward to following up with you to make sure that we address that. The other issue I wanted to raise with you had to do with one of the contractors down at Wallops. It turned out that for a period of time, they were discharging pollutants into the Chesapeake Bay. And it went undiscovered for a long period of time. Are you familiar with that circumstance?
Different than PFAS?
Yes.
Then I am not familiar.
Yeah, no, this has to do with nutrient overflow
Okay.
into the Chesapeake Bay from the activities at Wallops. It was one of the private contractors.
Okay.
And it was discovered. The contractor discovered it, and I think the person who had sort of knowingly allowed this to happen was let go. But we'd like to follow up with you on exactly what happened to make sure that that kind of incident doesn't happen.
I would be happy to do that.
And really, the last question I have is, I understand from your earlier testimony that, and I think I read that you would, the administration decided to move the target date for the next moon landing up to 2024.
Yes, sir.
I would just say that our policy decisions here need to be driven by the science,
Yes.
not by political calendars. And I understand you're going to submit a revised budget. But I would very much hope, Mr. Chairman and ranking members, that we don't allow a political priority that's not a scientific priority to drive away funding for what we all have sort of agreed are important priorities based on the science in this committee. So look forward to working with you. I mean, there are lots of things we want to do. We'd like to do them all right now. I'm going to follow up in writing on the web telescope situation. We had a briefing 6 months ago or something, but I'd like to get an update. But thank you for your leadership. Look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Van Hollen, thank you, and we look forward to a budget amendment, something from the administration outlining additional resources necessary and where those dollars might come from, and we'll take that request seriously, but we'll try to analyze it just as we would analyze any other budget request. Administrator, the vote has been called. I'm interested in striking an agreement with you, a deal.
Okay.
A Kansan and an Oklahoman. We'll conclude this hearing, but I'd like your agreement that Senator Shaheen and I can invite you back in the near future to sit down around the table and have a conversation. We'll invite our colleagues from the subcommittee to join us. And if that seems satisfactory to you, we'll conclude this hearing today rather than recessing it and coming back.
I would be happy to do that. If it's okay, I'd like to reference what Senator Van Hollen said for just 1 second regarding the timing. Because this is something that's important to me. It was important to me that the timing was important even when I was in the House of Representatives. We think about the effort to go to the moon. This has been tried before many times. We should be on the moon right now, but we're not. The reason it has failed in the past, there's really 2 risks. One is the technical risk, which NASA is very good at retiring. The other challenge is the longer the program goes, the more difficult it becomes to achieve the end state, because of the political risk. Budgets change, priorities change, administrations change. And so what we're trying to do here, we go back to the 1990s, we had the Space Exploration Initiative, and it failed because it took too long and the budgets never materialized. Then we had, in the 2000s, the Vision for Space Exploration, and then the same reason, the budgets changed, the priorities changed. So the faster we go, the more likely it is that we can realize the end state, and I think that's why when President Kennedy, to what Senator Shaheen was talking about, when President Kennedy announced that we were going to the moon, he put a very specific deadline on it, by the end of the decade, and I think that's an important thing for us to do.
No, if I could just say, Mr. Chairman, I guess the question for us is what are the opportunity costs of changing the schedule? What impact would that have on other priorities?
I understand.
Thank you.
Senator Shaheen has a follow-up question,
Okay.
and then we'll move toward concluding the hearing.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on heliophysics and space weather. As I know you're aware, New Hampshire is very much a space state. The University of New Hampshire does a lot of work in a number of areas, but one of those is heliophysics. And changing space weather conditions pose serious risks for our satellite infrastructure, for our power grid, for national security assets in so many ways. And according to a 2012 report released by Lloyd's of London, a severe space weather event could cripple our economy and cost up to $2.6 trillion. So can you talk about the roles that NOAA and NASA play in understanding and predicting space weather, and the assurances that you can give us, if you can, about our space weather infrastructure?
Yes. So NASA plays a critical role here when it comes to technology development and science exploration. We currently have in orbit around the sun the Parker Solar Probe, which is actually going to be flying through the solar corona, the atmosphere of the sun. An amazing technological accomplishment. It's already done a number of passes that have been very close and resulted in amazing science. What we're trying to do is get very good at predicting what causes these corona mass ejections, what causes these solar flares. These could be damaging to the Earth, because what happens is it's very, we go back to what we call the Carrington event in the 1800s. We had a corona mass ejection that impacted the Earth. In the 1800s, it was impactful, but today it would be far more impactful because we use the electromagnetic spectrum, we have power grids, all of that would be wiped out. It would potentially be existential to our country. So we need to be good at predicting, and then operationally, some of the systems that we have built, NOAA uses, ultimately for operational activities so they can provide warning and those kind of things. This is a mission that's important to NASA. It's a mission that's very important to our international partners. They are making investments in it the same as we're making investments in it, and we have further collaborations where we can all have an impact. We cannot afford, Senator, as you're aware, a Carrington-level event in today's era because we have so much dependency on the power grid and so much dependency on the electromagnetic spectrum.
So how important is the role of our universities in heliophysics and other science missions?
Very important. We make our data available to the world for free, and the universities do amazing research. They take the data, they utilize it, they help us understand what's happening, and they, in fact, in many cases, build the models by which we can make predictions in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Shaheen, thank you very much. Administrator, again, we will work at getting a date in the near future to have a conversation around a table here at the Capitol, and it is still important. I think there's a number of questions that we'd like to discuss with you as we complete our work on this appropriations bill.
Yep.
Senator Shaheen and I both want to make certain that the CJS appropriation bill is one, I hope, of all 12 that has passed early on in the appropriations process, and no need for a CR to a later date. So we'll be back in touch with you and your crew, and thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman.
No further questions can be had this afternoon, so therefore senators may submit additional questions for the subcommittee's official hearing record. We request that NASA respond to those questions within 30 days, and the subcommittee stands in recess.